Is the coaching search the new roster management? Asking for Tom. Is Friday Night Lights a show about high school football? Asking for MSU football fans. Is athletics an educational program? Asking for athletic directors everywhere. You're listening to Can't Read, Can't Write. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Can't Read, Can't Write, the podcast that proves Spartans can talk. I'm Mike Jones, joined as always by the Mike man himself, Kevin Greck, and not by the guy who's still seething about last week, Alex Plum. Kevin, should we address the elephant in the room?
Oh, my. I don't know. What did it say? I always hate it when podcasts talk about like inside baseball-y stuff. It's like no one cares about this, but it does.
Well, a lot of people did care.
It does seem like in this case, we got enough feedback, which is always appreciated, that maybe we should acknowledge that there was a bit of a technical issue on last week's podcast. And one that should be resolved for this week. So my apologies, my sincere apologies.
And for those who are like, how could you have not known? I do think we should point out that sometimes we record, and because all of the audio is supposed to be stored locally, there might be a network issue that causes some audio issues. But when we post, it always works itself out.
But not always.
It doesn't.
Always, but not always. This is the case. For those of you who
listened last week and powered through, like, sincerely, thank you. We are genuinely sorry about it. And yeah.
My Twitter question rule is that if you can make references to the last half, the second half of last week's podcast in your questions, you get automatic points. That's my Twitter questions competition rule for 2024,
which is starting next week. So
it is. Oh, that's good to know. First
we
I've
said
heard
June.
Of this.
We said June last week. You probably couldn't hear because you also couldn't talk. So hope that doesn't come up again and again later on this episode. We do want to thank everyone for listening. If we could ask a small favor, please share the pod, just not last week's episode, with Spartans in your life. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. And you can follow us, of course, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Spartan_pod. If it wasn't implied, you can watch the episode there as well. We try and throw in one visual bit per episode. I think we actually have a visual question this week, Kevin.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Breaking down the boundaries.
Favorite Twitter questioner. So
I look forward to that. All right.
All right, what are we doing this show, Kevin? Give the folks who maybe said, I'll give these Can't Read, Can't Write guys a second try.
A second chance. Last week. Well, then they know that we start with the green wall, where football always leads. And then we talk about the wider world of MSU athletics. Then we'll go off Grand River, which is, I think, the focus of this week's episode. There's a lot happening in college athletics. And people, Jonesy, as you know, they turn to us. In times of uncertainty, they're wondering what's happening, what's going on. They need to know, where is Ja? What does Ja think about all of this? And also, where is Can't Read, Can't Write? What did the guys think about all of this? So there was a big settlement, potentially. It still has a ways to go, but all of the Power 5 conferences, presidents and boards have signed off on it. So it looks like it's heading in that direction. We'll be discussing that at length. Then, as always, we'll take your Twitter questions. But there is one topic, Jonesy, that I want to take from off Grand River, and I want to move it up front.
Okay.
Because I think the loss of one Mr. Bill Walton is worth acknowledging and taking a moment to discuss right off the top. For those that haven't heard, Bill Walton, color commentator, of the gods and main advocate of the Pac-12 Conference of Champions, passed away of cancer this week. And we debated the merits of Bill Walton and his work on this podcast multiple times. And I want everyone to know that I've always been on the right side of this argument, that Bill Walton is a treasure. And before we talk any more about this, Jonesy, how did you feel about Bill Walton? Tell us.
As a human being, as wanting
as
to watch
a color
game.
commentator, as someone that you'd like to see on TV. So let's start
He's
there.
terrible.
Wrong.
But it has been a delight seeing clips of him posted. The thing about Bill Walton is that he was a joy to watch, unless you were trying to watch the game. But I just before we recorded saw one where someone brought up Liberty University and who was his longtime partner?
The play-by-play guy that you always ribbed for that kind of stuff.
Well, so there was a third person there who brought up Liberty, and whoever his play-by-play guy is, again, who's also fantastic, was like, let's move on. And Bill Walton's like,
let's not cover this.
Bill Walton is like, you want to talk about Liberty? Let's talk about Liberty. And again, what's his face is like, no, let's move on.
I really don't.
And Bill's like, never has been a university so unaptly named as Liberty University.
For those that don't know, Bill Walton was paired with a very traditional man whose name I don't recall.
Who's great. Like,
very good at his job.
Play-by-play guy. And was great with Bill.
And they had a real pairing. There was, I don't know if I saw this live or I just saw it very shortly after it happened, but at one point, Bill Walton gave him a copy of Darwin's theory of natural selection live on the broadcast to be like, you should really read this. Because he's like very traditional Christian. The earth is 7,000 years old, Old
Is
Testament
he really?
type. I believe so. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
At the very least, the theory of, what's the one where we don't know who the creator is, but obviously there was a hand that controlled all of this.
Prime mover?
No, this was big during the Bush administration where they were like,
I know what you're talking.
Maybe we should take evolution out of schools, or we should teach both sides of this. That garbage. So anyway, Bill Walton, a treasure. I was looking forward to him perhaps covering Big Ten games, but alas, we will not be seeing that.
That it is a bummer. It's sad. And yes, an icon for sure, and an advocate for a lot of great things. And maybe not my cup of tea for when MSU was playing, but again, that's my issue. That's a me problem. That's not a Bill Walton problem.
I mean, I think we're going to cover this again later, but the Pac-12 also passed away this week. The very end of the Pac-12 conference happened this week. And I watched
a walk-off home run, by the way.
Walk-off home run. Great way to end it. I watched that happen. It didn't really set in then that the Pac-12 was over. But Bill Walton dying, that's when I felt like the Conference of Champions is truly gone. And this is not a joke. Like, truly emotionally, that is how I process Bill Walton passing. And I feel terrible for his family members, of course, and those folks, but like, I so closely associate him with that athletic conference that I felt kind of both of them, losing both of them at the same time. It was strange.
Yeah. Maybe this is weird. Obviously very, very different people, but there's something about the passing of Bill Walton that reminds me of the passing of Norm Macdonald in an odd way.
Yeah.
Something about them that sort of they're truly marching to the beat of their own drum, right? Icons in their own right, and important to so many. So
As long as we're on this, as you're going to bring it up, we're going to keep talking about this.
We can keep talking about Norm Macdonald now, because
I love talking about Norm. I'm on board with that.
Did you? Quick aside, have you seen the roast of Bob Saget with
of course.
Norm
I sent you the
for 8
GIF.
minutes?
I sent you the GIF of of Norm looking up from his newspaper all the time. It comes from the roast of Bob Saget.
The newspaper? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, because he, in a roast, everyone kind of ribs everyone on the dais and then goes after the host of the show, right? And whenever people were ribbing on Norm, he would be reading his newspaper and he'd kind of like look up and then go back to his newspaper while all of that's happening. So that's where that GIF comes from. Yes, my take on celebrities when we lose celebrities is always feel bad for their families, of course, but like I only personally get invested in them if there's like something more that they have to give to the wider culture, society, whatever it is. And I think Norm's a great example of someone that clearly had more to give, taken too soon. And I think Bill Walton is another great example. There was a lot more beautiful color commentating still in that man that unfortunately we won't ever get to hear. So
yeah, well said. All right. Well, on that note, there's no good transitioning these topics.
No, talk about Norm Macdonald and Bill.
Well,
Walton.
here's the transition. Bill, famous for sort of Pac-12 after dark basketball. We've got football heading in the same light, Kevin.
Big Ten after
the
dark
green wall.
Friday nights.
Friday Night Lights. So MSU, 6 of the new 18 teams will be playing after or on Friday nights now. MSU is one of those 6 teams picking up 2 games. One at Oregon on the 4th of October, and then one with Purdue at home on November 22nd, 8 p.m. kick for that home game. I don't think we're going to be up real late for that Oregon game, I believe.
I mean, that's 8 Eastern, right? The Oregon game.
Oh, I thought that time spot was for the Purdue game. I do know that Rutger USC is kicking at 11 p.m. Eastern time.
Ooh, all right.
So no guarantees. But anyway, I think I'll just say, because I was the most upset about this, and I don't care that MSU is one of the 6 schools because, as others have pointed out about what MSU's win totals have been since 2016, it's hard to say that we're one of the best brands right now.
Yeah.
But that's not what made me upset about it. It was more that this is a compounding consequence, if you will, of conference consolidation, of loving our new corporate daddies, and that the thing that was sort of always you could set your watch to was playing on Saturdays, with the exception of obviously we'd kind of created a tradition of kicking off on a Friday before Labor Day. But college football Saturdays. And now, this is a disruption to tailgating, which I'm not even in town, but tailgating on a Friday is going to be different than tailgating on a Saturday, because there are now new rules in effect as it relates to the university's open for business of teaching things on Fridays, So
is that what MSU does predominantly? Is that what it's
supposed
to be known for?
What it does, but
because we're not going to get anywhere close to talking about anything academic on this episode.
No,
we're going to talk about sports getting further and further away from that mission every single day.
But do you know what I'm saying? That I don't care that MSU is the bad brand or drew the short straw here. Like, I don't care about that. It's that this has become normalized. Yeah. And when you're in the bucket with Rutger, that sucks too. But that's not the point.
But you're also definitely here in the bucket with Oregon. USC's in that bucket. Like,
But I think those are a consequence. Those are a consequence of scheduling and time zone differences more than anything else.
Sure. Okay. Fair
So,
enough. This doesn't bother me this year. Like, to me, this is kind of a wash year. In fact, I'd almost prefer that Oregon game was not seen by very many people
if you could also get on
nationwide.
Peacock, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd rather that not be broadcast at every bar across the country that Friday night. The Purdue
But it
one
will be.
great. I love the exposure of the Purdue game, other than the fact that it's a total crapshoot how many people are going to be at that one. But this year's a wash to me. I'm not upset about this yet, which might seem out of character because I sounded off the most about the team going to Ford Field during the Penn State game last year. So I don't personally have an issue with Friday night games. I know that that's supposed to be a high school night. I know that maybe it's a little bit embarrassing that we're playing in these, but for this year, this time, I don't particularly care. In the future, if this continues to be the case, you'll hear from me. But for the moment, I can live with it.
I think we're on a 2-year deal. All right, let's talk a little men's hoops. So as alluded to in the cold open, there is no news on the staff backfill, but there are some interesting rumors and interesting news. Tum Tum has been promoted to associate head coach at Bowling Green State University, which pretty much removes him from the running. The strong rumors are Saudi Washington, who's been spotted with Tom Izzo at, I believe, an AAU tournament, sitting next to him watching prospects.
Which is interesting because Saudi Washington is not a coach anywhere right now.
So I want to take this in two parts. First, I'd be remiss if I didn't detour for a second on Tum Tum. How to say this? Can you imagine Tom Izzo or Nick Saban, Bill Belichick, Mark D'Antonio, even like name your coach that you think is a high performing coach, losing a game and saying, well, at least we don't have cancer. Because I think for Tom Izzo, he would have rather won that game and had cancer, than the other way around. I'm as enthusiastic about the next person about a Spartan achieving success, professionally. But I suspect there will become a time when Tum Tum is circulated as a name for replacing Tom Izzo, and there is maybe I just don't understand the competitive bone that he probably has in his body. But it's confusing to me. Am I alone in that confusion?
I seem to remember the value of Tum Tum being that he was like a bit of a cheerleader, glue guy on the team, and not a like I fill in all the holes competitively glue guy. It was like it was a culture glue guy. And I don't see how that works as a coach. Maybe is one of the position coaches, I guess, if it had to be. The argument was, I think, always before that Tum Tum would come in as a director of player personnel that would move everyone kind of up a role. That would be the ceiling of what I'd be willing to have Tum Tum do. But having him kind of safely hired at Bowling Green sets up a potential external hire for that coaching role, which is what I think literally everyone listening to this podcast wants. So
can we so let's talk about Saudi for a second, but before we do, you've got a real face-off vibe going on the camera right now. There we go. Now I can see all of you. So Saudi is interesting for a few reasons.
Let me saddle up here.
Has a a great track record of doing some pretty good recruiting, some pretty good development of big men, if we're being honest, at least big men who are effective at the college level.
Sure. For those that don't know, Sadie Washington spent the last, 7 years at the University of Michigan?
Yeah, so both under Juwan and Beeline.
Yeah.
But we had a whole conversation the last couple weeks about people from that school or going to that school.
Right.
Does that stain apply for you in the coaching ranks? Is it something unique about basketball? The fact that Saudi's interviewed multiple times for this job now and is from the area, does that change things for you? Like, give me your thoughts here.
What I'm going to need Saudi to do is go from person to person and present at MSU to everyone his personal diorama about how he was wrong before, but it was all a building block to getting to him to where he's at right now. And he does this at the Izzo camp out at literally every tent. So he stands there and he says, this is me trying to get into MSU. Here I am with these players. And then he continues on. And then at the end, he steps in front and he says, so for your consideration, thank you. I'm happy to be here right now. Go green forever. And then he burns another article of his University of Michigan provided regalia in front of you, presumably. And then he moves on to the next and does the presentation again.
I would also accept, that's great, but as an alt, if he just merely said, look, there's no one who advocated harder for Juwan to be hired. There was no one who advocated harder for Juwan to be retained. And every time Juwan got a little heated, it was me in his shoulder just saying, do it, Juwan. Hit him. Hit him. Immediately won me over. But yeah, look, I think in Saudi Washington, if that ends up being the hire, you've picked up clearly a quality, a coach who's capable of coaching in a quality system.
Sure.
Right? Because you can't fix stupid, which is what we're going to call Juwan, but coached under Beeline and had a ton of success there. So, if you assume that Tom Izzo is running a successful program, which even in our down years, it benchmarks as a successful program, then Saudi's up to task.
Right.
And yeah, it hopefully isn't being asked to do all of the recruiting, but nice pickup if that ends up being true. Couple other notes, Kevin Greck, supposedly, and this comes from both Xavier Booker and Dr. Lorenzo White, not Lorenzo White, Lorenzo Guess, the MSU basketball strength and conditioning coach. Xavier Booker's up 20 to 25 pounds this offseason, which would
30
be
pounds? Good for him. 30 total pounds. All right.
That puts him at 245, which is probably pretty great. So we'd be excited about that. And then last note, it was announced the Final Four is going to be in Detroit in 2027. Let's get it on record right now. As Tom Izzo circled his retirement party.
I would say this as the Final Four is on the schedule for 2027.
And do you think Tom's out after that?
He's going to win it. And as we've said before, he's going to sail off on into the sunset after that. So.
All right. We got to shout out some MSU. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we're a tennis school now, right? As I understand it. So we should cover men's tennis.
Golf. Yeah.
Mrs. Scandalaris was ahead of everyone on this one, man. Putting her money down. So Okemos native, Ozan Barris. Is it Ozan? Ozan?
Sure.
Ozan Bari. Ozembic Barris went on to the semifinals of the NCAA tournament and only fell in a third set tiebreaker. So like he's a sophomore, right?
Heartbreaker. Is he a sophomore or junior?
I think he's a sophomore.
Wow. Then they're kind of stacked then, because they've got Aristotle Thanos also, who's going to be pretty great. Like,
dude, we knew this before. We covered this.
Yeah.
We covered this tennis recruiting class when it happened. I remember that because I was like, dang, dude, we're covering a tennis recruiting class right now. So very exciting. I know, truly a heartbreaker here, but a lot to look forward to for the MSU tennis program. Yeah.
Like, he's like, I'm going to mine next year.
Yeah.
So
I've got some unfinished business. You can call me the Terminator out here. So it just goes to show, Jonesy, we've discussed it here on the podcast multiple times. Like, when we were in school and for years afterwards, the non-revenue sports were an entire afterthought. And that was on purpose. The athletic department just gave them no consideration at all. But now we've seen it in gymnastics. We've seen it in hockey. We've seen it in women's soccer. We've seen it in men's soccer. We're seeing it in men's tennis. We've seen it in cross country. Like,
women's golf, and you have hopes for women's basketball and volleyball as well. Like,
yeah, give these sports just a little bit of support. Yes,
Crew got
even
a brand
Crew,
new locker room.
even Crew, the Title IX
farm
vault that is Crew. Even that, just give these sports a little bit. You know, we're having this conversation right when maybe it's the end of all of these sports. But for years, it was just decided MSU cannot walk and chew gum at the same time. It has to be football and basketball and nothing else. But here it is. Truly, this is an athletic program that I think can do it all.
And I think it's worth saying that we're going to continue to be critical of Alan Haller when he earns it. But to your point, he rejected this notion that they're mutually exclusive.
Right.
And has clearly made quality coaching hires, but also has done the work to find investments in these programs and provide as much support as he can. While it's not official, it seems pretty clear that this is Sparta is not wanting for the NIL collective that supports, I believe, 11 sports at MSU, is not wanting for whatever access is needed to get their job done. So yeah. And while, am I going to become a tennis diehard? No, I'm not. But am I super proud of the fact that we had a dude who accomplished that much and we look loaded for next season? Yes, I am. And that stuff does matter. So obviously, congrats to the student athletes who did what they did to get MSU to that place. And then Ozan in his own right as an individual accomplishing that in the NCAA. But also shout out to Alan Haller, who seems to have prioritized that being great can just be a thing and it doesn't need to be an abacus equation. So
yeah, I have the quote actually here from Ozan about this. He said, quote, I'm not running away from anything, I'm running towards something. And that being success for non-revenue sports.
You have a note here that you wanted to roll on me about something.
Yeah. So we got the second part of speaking of Alan Haller, we got the second part of the Haller Couch.
Yes.
Interview. We knew that there was going to be some discussion in there about Central. Any reaction to that? Anything else that you wanted to cover on that subject before
I'm trying to remember. It wasn't just Central, because there was a couple of other things in that bit, that sort of side piece that came out. But I don't recall what they were.
Is this negging that you're doing right now for Graham?
Genuinely, it was a week
several days ago. Yeah.
And inexplicably, Graham Couch decided to drop the article and then just take a week off. So it's not like I've heard him answering questions or responding to takes for 6 hours of my life over the last week. So I just don't remember. Apparently, repetition is valuable, and I've not gotten the repetition. But I was listening back to our episode as I was discovering the audio flaws that we were going through.
Because you wanted the repetition of that. That's what you were seeking out. It's a real pain Olympics situation that you have going on over there.
Self-flagellation, yeah.
Yes. Okay. That's what she's into. Got it.
I don't think we nailed that part of the conversation about Alan Haller and the idea of him being, I think I described it, one of us in the sort of fan sense of the word, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's worth totally revisiting it. It just I appreciate that an AD can be doing all the things that he's doing, and at the same time not forgetting. Right, I guess is my point, that it seems like for him he has not forgotten what happened, and that was not okay. And previous ADs might have looked at this all very transactionally, and so
that was one of my big critiques of, since I've already brought it up in this episode. One of my big critiques of moving the game to Ford Field last year, the football game, was that it seemed like a solid that we were doing for the Big Ten that's never reciprocated. And we, as a university and as an athletic department, tend to roll over on these things time and time and time again. Now, listen, I get it. I'm a total beta as well. It's well documented. Jason Fry, I'm sure, can give you the itemized list of all of the beta-like things that I've said over the years. So I understand that, and it's a game recognizes game situation, and I would hope for my athletic department that they would be better than me in that way. So to hold Central accountable, maybe someday, whenever this investigation concludes, and like, my God, like when I heard that, I was like, is there some gumshoe up in Mount Pleasant, like following up leads, running prints on the sideline, like doing interviews under a light, that none of those things is happening. Like,
well, the NCAA may have had to cut some staff recently. So, but
anyway, I think basically it reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if this has ever been really reported, but Izzo does not seem to care for Detroit Mercy. You'll notice Detroit Mercy never shows up. We never give them any of the like signal boosting, we'll say, is probably the language that you would use on the internet. None of the shine of having them in Breslin Center. You pay them, you put them on TV, you say nice things about them. Everything that we do for Oakland every year. You'll notice that never happens with Detroit Mercy. And maybe that'll start to change now that Mark Montgomery is down there. In fact, I would expect it to. But if you could do that pariah treatment with Central for the next 25 years,
across
I'm down.
All sports.
Exactly. I am down for that. No more battles for 127. You made your bed. Now sleep in it.
And make it give it all to Western.
Exactly. We'll be focusing on Western and Eastern from here on out.
Yep. Well said. I think there's a note on here that did you want to say trash me about something, or did you delete that?
No, I trashed you last week. That was
nailed it. Got it.
I can only trash you so much. I think the listeners understand that you're a sensitive little guy, and I have to go easy. This is your off week. So,
all right. Let's let's head off Grand River. But before we do, I did want to ask you. You traveled off Grand River recently.
I did. I just went off Grand River the other day,
And what did you do off Grand River?
Well, I took the turn off Grand River onto 127, and then I took the turn again onto I-94, and my little tummy was rumbling. And I said, man, I'm in Grass Lake. Where do I get a bite, Mike Jones? And then, wouldn't you know it, shining beacon on the hill, Mama's Mercantile and Exchange in Grass Lake. And let me tell you, the new menu is out, and it is a delight. The patio's now available. It's got multiple fire pits. You should go and have a drink or several drinks next to them on the lovely tables out there. That place is on the come up right now, and I think you should get in early. And I think you should get 10% off your bill by mentioning "Can't Read, Can't Write" at some point.
Did you mention
your
"Can't
stay.
Read, Can't Write"?
You won't guess who got a 10% discount yesterday. You guess. See if you can guess who got a 10% discount yesterday.
You.
Yeah, it was me. I did because I mentioned "Can't Read, Can't Write," and they were like, "Another one? Oh my gosh, we're just giving it away out here."
What'd you have?
We had the carnivore pizza. I don't remember what it's actually called, but it's the pizza with a lot of meat on top of it. And it was a delight. Thin crust, very nice, very generous on the toppings. Really enjoyed it. Other people had some cocktails, which are fantastic. And the names are also fun. And then also, I saw a little line item on the menu that said $3 domestic bottles for Memorial Day. I don't know if this is always on there, but I was like, dial me up. High life. Let's go. So that was my experience at Mama's Mercantile and Exchange, and it was a delight. And the conversation, fantastic. Company, amazing.
All right, let's head off Grand River. We're going to chat some liquors after off Grand River. But you know what?
Put this at back.
Actually,
this is
we're
a
plug.
Do
this.
This is the visual gag that he was talking about earlier. This is for YouTube only.
Indeed, where we're headed. Aptly named. Listener, you will have to see to get the gag, but I married it. Kevin.
Yeah. So it's been a big week. Dead. Yeah, it is. It does very much remind me of the old adage of like history, nothing happens for decades and then decades happen in a year. Like just since the pandemic, the amount of stuff that has changed.
Yeah.
And now another enormous sea change this week with presumably the settlement over the House lawsuit, which we've been covering, has now been voted on by all of the Power 5 conferences, all of the presidents of the Power 5 conferences, not voted on.
Includes Pac-12, by the way.
It does.
The two people got in a room.
Yep. And they were like, look at us, Pac and 12. It's actually Pac 1 and 2 now. I thought maybe
I'd get out thing 1, thing 2.
Yep. I thought I might get a spit take out of that, but it's fine.
That was good.
All
right, so should we lay some groundwork and then get into it?
Yes.
So the NCAA and the Power 4, Power 5, whatever you want to say, conferences have agreed to pay $2.8 billion in a settlement to athletes who opt in, who played in NCAA athletics from June of 2016 to November of 2023. $1.65 billion of that will be paid by the Power 5. And the remainder will be paid by the NCAA. And then that is where things start to get less fun, I guess. So, fun facts. None of the non-Power 5 schools had any input on this because they weren't named in the lawsuits, but they're on the hook for $900 million. it looks like that will largely be funded by the NCAA by not paying out their units from March Madness. So, if for those who don't know, when you make a game in the tournament, that game counts as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
And that unit comes with essentially a share payout, right? A share of your TV revenue. So when a school like St. Pete's from 2 years ago, famously beat Purdue, makes a run in the tournament, they get increasing payouts over time. So it's not just a big
They get
deal.
bigger and bigger units is what you're telling me.
And then those in almost all instances, I don't think there's an exception to this rule, that unit gets distributed to the conference. So it's a big deal when a small school makes a run in the NCAA tournament. The irony in all of this that really should not be lost on anyone is that the reason we got here is football, and the thing that saved it all is basketball. Like, no joke, financially, that is precisely what happened here.
I mean, the NCAA tournament has been funding the NCAA as an institution the entire time that it's existed.
They make zero money on bowl games. Like,
correct.
So they don't make any, I don't think they make any money on football by and large. So
no, very little.
So anyway, I expect diciness over the next 5 years, frankly, as we figure this all out. The amount to be paid, Kevin, walk us through that. What's on a per athlete basis? You're an economist.
Yeah, I am, and I'm going to make the economics school here at MSU very proud right now. So there's everything looking back. That's the settlement, and that's going to be divvied out. Sports economist is going to write a formula. It's going to determine
sports.
I have no idea. Like, I can't even imagine how you begin, because as we're going to talk about here in the revenue sharing portion, it can't be just a baseline dollar amount. It has to be based off of your marketability. So how a sports economist is going to determine this, after the fact, I have no idea. It'll be based on like playtime or games participated in or something like that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Right, like we're gonna get into what happens with the rev share, but spoiler alert, if you're heading into 2025, you've got to make rev share decisions at the beginning of 2025 because you got to sign your guys, right? But can you imagine somebody who ends up being a star in a bigger way than anticipated? Because of the look back, could potentially get a payout that is not commensurate what they would have gotten at the time had this been put in place.
Yeah.
Like, let's use an MSU example. Most recent vintage I can think of is maybe Joey Hauser. Right, like, good player, but had a great final season with us that was above and beyond what he had done before.
Right.
If you're doling out NIL dollars for Joey Hauser, and let's not pretend you're Tom Izzo, who had a weird affection for the guy, but like, you might value Joey Hauser in a different way at the beginning of the season than you would have at the end of the season.
Or Kenneth Walker. One season he's valued as a Wake Forest backup running back. In the next season, he got screwed out of the Heisman ceremony.
And was awarded best player in the country by multiple other places.
By dudes that know ball. So, like, I honestly have no idea how you even begin to crack this nut. The other part of this is moving forward, compensation for athletes moving forward, and that includes revenue sharing. On paper right now, it looks to be starting at 21 to 22 million per school, which will increase. It does step up every year for the next 10 years. There's a 4% automatic escalator, I believe.
For the first 3, and then it gets reevaluated by the court.
Okay, very good. From there, it gets even more wild, I would say. Like, because this is starting to be doled out by the universities. Again, core to this is that you cannot do a flat rate. It needs to be based on market value. So now the universities will be, provisioning dollars directly to players. They will be doing so based on the market rate as they understand it for those players. And there are some folks that think that Title IX is involved in this whole thing, but that is in tension with the fact that this is football dollars. So, like, do you provision money for women athletes that don't command the same dollar amounts? Like, let's just be honest, there are going to be no female athletes on the field when we play Oregon on Friday night on Fox, which is what's driving all of this. Yep. So when you talk about fair market value for the men, on paper, way higher. So what are the Title IX implications in all of this? So it's by 2025, and we've been saying MSU was expecting this. We had it as a podcast that we thought that this was going to happen as part of the new Big Ten media rights deal. It didn't end up happening. We had that from a good source. But now it's here. It is happening. There is some kind of plan for it, but I can't even imagine how you start with something like this.
Well, so let's, if we can, let's take a step back for a second. So the 21 to 22 million dollars per school. Some quick notes on that for those who are nerdy about this. There's a couple things that'll count towards that cap. The biggest one are what are called Alston payments, which is which is a Supreme Court case that essentially allowed schools to just start throwing some extra cash at their student athletes.
That was kind of the per diem that they've had for several years now.
And it's not actually an insignificant amount of money that's going to come out via Alston payments. But the 21 to 22, some folks have pointed out as a rev share, and you, dear listener, may find this hard to believe, but that is as a percentage of budget quite small. It actually is. I'm sorry, let me rephrase. As a percentage of revenue is quite small, which most other collective bargaining agreements between, no, this is not a collective bargaining agreement, but that between other professional leagues and its players are in the 50% threshold. So 21 to 22 million tracks at about 20% for the average Power 4 institution. The theory on how they came up with that number is that if you add in the scholarship values, which on average is an additional $15 million paid out, plus all of the extra benefits that student athletes get that the regular students don't, which includes things like medical care, tutors, etc., swag, gear, blah, 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 that now you've reached that 50% threshold as a metric of revenue. So that number is actually kind of important because it's not a guarantee that the judge approves this. So the idea was to get to a value that replicates a CBA. And I would say importantly that in all of this, it's kind of it's interesting and worth just taking note of as we work through this, that the value of a scholarship was important in all of this. Greg.
Yeah.
You touched on other quick aside is we're defining revenue, and this makes it kind of fun. Donations don't count.
Correct.
So interestingly, you can cover these payments via donation without it increasing your revenue cap.
Your top revenue cap. I mean, there's like, if you're looking at the abacus of how all of this works, there's like 15 different sliders going back and forth on this.
So you brought up two things, Title IX and the mechanism for valuing things.
Let's start with the second one first. Let's start with the mechanism for valuing things. So as I said before, there's going to be a cap, and this is a cap, which is its own interesting little thing, because
it's illegal.
Because as we've said before, the NCAA does not have an antitrust exemption from Congress. So the idea that I don't know where this cap is coming from. I guess it's an agreement in this case between those that opt in to the terms of this settlement, which presumably would be a large portion of the student athletes, and the institutions.
Yeah,
that's table where this cap comes from.
Let's table how this all falls apart until the end.
Yeah. So you've got this cap. And then it's got to be allocated by the school, and it needs to be allocated.
It doesn't need to be allocated per se by the school. It's up to the school's discretion. That's an important distinction, because there's a theory that many schools are pursuing that they will literally pass this through to their NIL collective.
So it's possible that Spartan NIL or SpartyNIL.com,
whatever the hell it's called,
is all of a sudden going to be allocating an additional $22 million from MSU.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, Greg Williams goes from being guy that just wants to win more to now I'm responsible for this whole budget.
And he starts doing the Superman 3 thing or whatever. He's just like taking the fractions of pennies on the overnight interest or whatever. Like,
is that actually from Superman 3, or is that just something that they say in Office Space?
I think it is actually from.
I thought you were going to go with flies into space and then starts going counterclockwise across the rotation to put Earth back in time so that he can get out of this deal. Because my God, I can't imagine going from just being rich dude that just wants to win to now being responsible for all of this. That sounds truly awful.
And dear listener, it is from Superman 3.
Yeah, Superman 3. Just rounding up just crazy decimal places. So there is that. And then this brings in necessarily Title IX. So we're losing the structure of this conversation just trying to cover off on everything. That's how wild this is.
All right. And so let's. Okay. All right. Let's.
I shouldn't have had a beer and a half before we broke this thing off.
No. All right. So let's talk about Title IX.
Mm-hmm.
Because Title IX has implications that are going to come up now and then later as we pursue this conversation. So as it relates to revenue sharing specifically, Title IX is a bit of a conundrum here. There are plenty of advocates who think, including the plaintiffs, the NCAA, and other reputable sources, who think that Title IX will not apply in this particular instance. But if you're saying, okay, what does Title IX have to do with it? Technically, the university is doling out a benefit to student athletes, and that needs to be done in some modicum of equality. There needs to be equitable opportunity. And so there are plenty of very convincing folks who are certain that a conversation starts and ends with Title IX applying to this scenario. If Title IX does in fact apply, then what did we do here?
Yeah.
Because the whole purpose of this was that football said, we make so much money.
Yeah. Yep.
And then you because what universities are doing right now is they take the money in from football and basketball to a degree, and then they distribute that money evenly to every other sport. It is because for the most part, these are all nonprofit institutions. And so they run this at a loss to near loss, depending on how good you are of a school. MSU being a good one, presumably it banks some money, but it holds it in a way that maintains its not-for-profit status, rainy day funds, that kind of a thing. But it is largely taking football money and supporting the remainder of student athletes with that money.
Correct.
So if you choose to ingest this money and then Title IX applies, then you have to distribute that money back out evenly, which means that and this is that your deceased swim and dive team is entitled to as much money as Aiden Childs.
Mm-hmm.
When the fact of the matter is that the reason that money exists in the first place is not because they're equal.
And when the fact of the matter is that swimming doesn't matter, and if you care about that at all, you're an unserious individual. So that's part of all of this as well. They literally filled in the pool with garbage because swimming is a garbage
from
program.
Football game days.
That's right. All right. So let's take all of this aside.
Wait, hold on. Sorry. So for Title IX to not apply, so like I guess I want to make sure that everyone understands this. That if you end up making equitable distributions of this money, then the whole point of the lawsuit is mooted.
Yes.
You're likely to get sued again.
But
if you make out inequitable distributions, then you're likely to get sued again for violations of Title IX. So, like, I'm sorry, I wanted to make sure that we got this crystal clear that it's still fucked. So that's just the paying things out part of this, because we haven't gotten to the next big piece of this, which is scholarship caps.
Yes. So now it seems that, well, go ahead. You feel more comfortable with all of these subjects, obviously, than I do. So go ahead.
I don't know
Explain
about that.
The facts.
I'm deeply uncomfortable. So one of the components of the settlement is also that scholarship caps are being eliminated. So what you may not know is that in sport like baseball or softball, there's like 11.7 scholarships for a 32-person team.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up happening is that a lot of players receive partial scholarships. Some might receive a full scholarship. Others receive no scholarship at all, but they're all varsity athletes. There's not like a preferred walk-on situation. It just is what it is. The coach has
I think a lot of us understand that. Like either at MSU, you knew someone that was on partial scholarship, or like we've talked about this at length. Or that was the big argument for the swim team, the now defunct swim team and filled in a pool, was that actually it's a revenue plus
generating. Yeah.
Because everyone's on partial scholarships, so they take the tuition dollars, blah, 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 blah. It's fuzzy math, but sure.
Well, that doesn't apply now.
Mm-hmm.
So this settlement invalidates that. But the problem is, as you might surmise, is that, well, wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
I might have more funding for my baseball. Let's say you go SEC country. I might have more funding for my baseball team than I do my softball team. So, but you can't, if you're going to up your baseball scholarships, you got to cover a women's sport as well.
Right.
So this uncapped scholarship limit actually introduces a bit of a tricky situation as it relates to Title IX. And you're going to start seeing some interesting choices from athletic departments. And while Title IX will be a constant in this space, the consequence is that you're going to probably see some sports cut.
Yeah.
So, because you're like, well, I can fund crew at a high level at this school, and I can fund baseball, but I can't fund softball any longer. And because I just don't have a donor, Frank, because that's what this is now. Now we're in the space where billionaires are playing and funding scholarships. Because if you're saying, again, the SEC baseball is super popular, right?
Because just to go back, the reason why you say that is that donations don't count as revenue.
Right.
So that's a little like sneaky backdoor into all of this stuff.
But so now you're at the whims of donors, right? Because now, if you are in the SEC where baseball is a huge sport, you want to gain a competitive advantage. You want to fund your team to the max. And so what are you going to do? You're going to reach out to your alumni base, your donors, and you're going to say, give me more scholarships so I can rob other SEC teams of these players. It's the same shit we see in football, which is as near as a comparable as you can get because it is a max scholarship sport, right? So
you might remember when the SEC used to like oversign a ton of guys, and spring every year, 7 of them would get cut from Alabama because there just weren't scholarships for those guys. Similar situation, except for now billionaires are providing those scholarships.
Yes. But the consequence of moving up to 32 scholarships in baseball is that you're going to have to make up those scholarships in another sport. And if you can't, you're going to have to make some cuts.
Yep.
So maybe your men's wrestling team goes away. And so these are like truly not great consequences. We just spent time up top under the green wall talking about how we were really proud of the fact that we have a university that's competing in other sports. That shit might disappear. You might find that the golf clubs also filled up the swim pool.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence, I think, that Graham asked Alan Haller on the subject of like, are we going to be cutting schools in the near future? Or not schools, but sports in the near future. And Alan said, you're going to have to find another athletic director. And as I thought about this more, not to take anything away from Alan Haller, he might sincerely believe that for himself. But it reminds me a little bit of when someone like a Luana K. Simon would say to the press, if we start paying the players, you're going to need to find a new president for the university. I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something along those lines. It was like over my dead body or something like that, something equally dumb. I mean, here we are. There's realities of all of this stuff coming down the track, and the best laid plans of mice and men, who knows what's going to happen? Which gets me to my big
didn't
question.
Have to face that because Luana was the fucking worst.
Yeah, she had other stuff going on. So here's the big question for this podcast. We finally got into it. What does this mean for MSU? Well, first and foremost, as we've said, and we've said for the last year, Keith Ski, thank you very much on the record. MSU was expecting this. The Big Ten schools were expecting this to happen last fall. It didn't. They do have some kind of plan for this, is my understanding.
Yeah, and if I can just pull up here. So the new NCAA settlement payments represent about 16.5% of MSU's athletic department budget, which is 1% of the total university budget. They're fine. They're fine.
This stuff isn't going away. That's for sure. Like, it's not going to collapse.
But Haller's going to be able to afford it. It's going to be fine.
I do have a line item. What does this mean for smaller institutions? We'll get to that. But this is where it pays to have that massive, the massive media rights deal is what got you here to begin with. And now you're benefiting from it. It's the taking the money out of one pocket, putting it into another. All of this is happening so that we can watch MSU play Oregon on Friday night. Truly. Just ask yourself if all of this was worth it.
Sit in that for a second. and you felt like you needed the money before all of this so you could build the facilities. Like, anyway,
So there is some kind of plan for it. This does, though, add a lot of overhead to the athletic department unless they decide to pass this through to the NIL collectives, which maybe that's the plan, maybe it's not. We don't know. We don't have that information.
Yeah, so can we spend a second on collectives?
Sure.
Okay. So I want to personally apologize to Mike Fisher from Twitter, who I got in a back and forth with because at the time, the reporting was that there was nothing to believe that NIL collectives were going away. And there's still nothing for certain to indicate that NIL collectives might be going away. But apparently the NCAA and its member institutions might be asking for a third-party repository of third-party NIL deals. So imagine your SD4L bullshit. Run-of-the-mill SD4L bullshit, whatever your school's version of that nonsense is, plus your university wiener or whatever, that athletes would have to register that income there or face some meaningful consequence if they don't do that, like suspension, like loss of eligibility. And that money would contribute to their total NIL value, their fair market NIL value. So as we talk about paying out TV revenue in accordance with fair market value, that if you're not doing something real like University Wiener, which I think is actually a legitimate endeavor.
I think we'll know that as the University Wiener carve out. Mm-hmm. I think that's what
we'll call SD4L billionaire bullshit.
Yeah.
Air quote billionaire. But if you're indulging in billionaire bullshit, then that doesn't count as real NIL. So that cuts against the amount of TV revenue. So let's say Aiden Childs is worth, we'll call it $3 million for the sake of argument. And SD4L, the defunct SD4L, is paying in $1.5 million. Well, then MSU only has to make up the 1.5 delta. They don't have to make up the 3. Is the idea behind the proposal. It doesn't eliminate collectives, but it does potentially add a wrinkle if this gets approved by the judge, which is still an income cap, which is still an antitrust violation. But anyway.
Correct. That's what I was just going to say. I bet this does not happen because it effectively disincentivizes true NIL activity. And if I were a student athlete, I would make the argument that no, this is me actually, profiting from my name, image, and likeness. It has nothing to do with the university, even though it does. I think we all know that it does. So why would that be carved out? Would be the argument. And I'm guessing when push comes to shove, the universities aren't going to want that heat, and this won't end up happening.
It's also a convincing argument to not bring your NIL collective in-house.
Correct.
So the argument for moving it in-house is it makes your contribution is tax deductible. Potentially, you don't have to go out and hire somebody. You've already got proficient professionals in the space to make the payments. Like there's some pretty compelling reasons.
Presumably. That the word presumably is doing a lot of heavy lifting on that one.
Or they're really good at canceling them while people are on a plane. But whatever. But so there's good reasons to move it in-house. There are also compelling reasons to keep it external. One, it might avoid Title IX implications, and the other is that it allows that external org to supplement your TV revenue. So if you want a competitive advantage, your billionaire Steve St. Andre can still contribute money.
There's still that incentive.
Yeah, so you can still out-recruit your Bamas, your Georgias, your Michigans.
Yeah, highest states, USCs. So we're jumping around all over the place on the outline, but I'm trying to make sure that we cover everything. So
can we do a portal adjacent? Can we do NIL collective adjacent, which is portal?
Let's hold that for a second.
Okay.
Let's focus right on. Look at me. Look at me. I'm the host now. So if we're focused on what this means for MSU, we've covered that they have a plan for this. We've covered what it could mean for overhead at the athletic department. We've covered what it could potentially mean for non-revenue sports, regardless of what Alan Haller says. Is there anything else that you think is really important from a MSU specific vantage point on all of this? Let me put in one more. There's been a lot of, whether it's this Friday night thing, whether it's the fact that MSU, if you didn't see this, is in the tier 2 revenue band for the new NCAA football
I'll get that
video game
on the outline because there's an LOL in there. But okay.
Well, it's dumb. It's like
no. This is not MSU specific. This is off Grand River for a reason.
So all of this is to say there has been some chicken littling about, does this mark the beginning of the end of competitiveness for MSU? Is this truly where the real haves separate from the just regular haves, which MSU is one, and then we leave behind entirely the have-nots? I would say that this does not put MSU in really significant peril of being left behind entirely. I would say that this is kind of the formal separation of the Big Ten and the SEC from basically everyone else in terms of resources, dollar amounts, like size of the athletic department, etc. Like, I think that the next most important thing is like, what does this mean for smaller institutions? If you're the MAC, if you're, head on down from there, I mean, they're toast, right? Like, there's just no meaningful way for them to compete without the TV revenue that the SEC and the Big Ten are getting, and the ACC, as we've discussed about 1,000 times, is not. Like,
yeah, but what? But this feels like a moment of unintended consequences, right? And so I have you're absolutely right that those things could happen, but of equal consequence could very well be that the MAC decides that the payday for games is astronomically higher. And so, instead of a $1 million check, we're going to demand that the Big Ten cuts a $2 million check every time that the MAC play. Like, you're probably right, but at the same time, we've invented this the almighty god of football, to whom we must pay all homage. You gotta have some buy games in there. You gotta have your buy games. And so does the price of those buy games go up? Because the MAC doesn't need that anymore in the same way. Like, you've already bankrupted us. And so you need our reputation. Now, we're lucky that we have several wonderful institutions in the state to choose from. We've got Western, we've got Eastern, we've got Oakland, maybe. Wayne State, maybe.
That's
Northern
it.
Michigan. I mean, those are the schools I can think of.
Yeah, certainly that's the list.
So I don't, I would not be shocked to find out that the payout on those games increased astronomically. And whether do they become less competitive?
That's the angle. When I say they're toast, that's the angle I'm coming from.
Well, but I've already played Prairie View A&M, and I think they might be toast.
Right.
Like, they may just not exist any longer. Because why?
Well, that gets to a question that we've had years ago, which was, I always assumed that the SEC and the Big Ten would break off and do their own thing. I think what we're seeing here is actually the beginning of the NCAA is going to become the SEC and the Big Ten, and everyone else will break off from the NCAA. Because Prairie View is going to look at the math on this and say, we can't make this work. we're going to go find our own way. We're going to go D2, whatever it is. And all of that will eventually break away from the SEC and the Big Ten. We've been on this subject for a long time. I think we need to do a part 2 next week.
All right.
So topics that we could cover, part 2 next week.
Can we just talk briefly about the portal? Very briefly.
Yes. That's a potential silver lining in all of this, right?
Yeah. This probably gets better. The portal gets better. So you might be saying, Jones, you said NIL collectives are still going to exist. Yeah, probably they still will. But athletes might have to opt into a revenue share agreement with their universities that's multi-year and has a buyout in the same way that coaching contracts do. Does that mean that Derek Harmon won't leave? Probably not.
Yep.
Because you know what? Someone could, for a player like that, you could probably cough up enough cash to buy somebody out of their deal. But will you have the same mass exodus from your program? Almost certainly not. And so the one upside in all of this is that probably even if collectives still exist, that the portal is going to get a lot harder because the schools are already actively talking about multi-year deals with buyout clauses. Now, I will say, big asterisk. Is there a race to the bottom? Talent is finite. There are too many schools that offer the same thing. Talent is finite, and there's not enough inventory at the top level. Like, you could see this all eroding. It'd be really nice if almost they had the ability to collude with each other on some agreed upon rules of the road.
Hey!
Which is the last adjacent point, which is the plaintiffs have agreed to lobby Congress on behalf of the NCAA for institutionalizing this as the law.
So, for part 2 for next week, come back, listeners. Topics include probably dig in more to what this means for smaller institutions. We'll, of course, expand on what this means for MSU as new information comes to light. Expand on the future of NIL. I know you guys can't wait to hear about that. Future litigation. This is not the only case. And as we've discussed, it invites more cases. So we'll cover what those could be. And then like other future questions, like should football even still count for Title IX in the future? Like, will this incentivize us to kind of move football players off of any like strictly academic benefits and move entirely pay to play? Scholarship limits, like even eligibility limits. So like, is the last vestige of amateurism going to be gone soon? Like, do these guys even need to be in school anymore? I thought it was interesting that all of this is happening the same week that the Michigan Panthers announced that they're looking to move to East Lansing or Ann Arbor. Like, those towns have professional football teams now with guys that make more money than the Michigan Panthers do. So I don't know what that's. It's just very interesting timing for all of that to be going on at the same time.
And if you found this conversation to be disjointed or jumpy, then I would just encourage you to. There's a lot of pitching online from plaintiffs' attorneys, even from the NCAA, its member institutions who have agreed to this. That this is something linear. That this happens, then as a consequence of this, we have this new system. That's bullshit. It is not
Correct.
linear. It's not obvious. There are a lot of questions yet to be sorted out. And if you get people off the record, they are terrified because you now have to make a whole risk assessment about like, how risky do I want to be about sending out these NIL payments? Do I want to comply with Title IX or do I not want to comply with Title IX? I don't know what to do. And then if I don't comply with Title IX and it ends up being Title IX doesn't need to be like, do I lose a competitive advantage in football because I didn't like it's a real clusterfuck. So anyway, this conversation jumped around. I still think it was a good one, and bear with us as we get to the rest of it next week.
Do you want to end on some frivolity as you've written in here?
Yeah, I do. I want to talk about the EA sports payments to schools. So I don't I want to zero in on one school in particular. Do you know what school I want to zero in on?
No.
Have you clicked
me.
on the link?
I mean, I've seen this graphic. So let me
Uh-huh.
guess. The graphic, listeners, is the list of the tier 1 versus tier 2 versus tier 3 versus tier 4. Is this Iowa being in tier 1? Is that what this is about?
Indeed.
What about, I mean, Oklahoma State? You could say the same thing. I think I know where you're going with this, but
Well, Oklahoma State doesn't experience the same dichotomy that Iowa has experienced. So,
yeah.
For those who don't know, based upon what your average ranking was over the last, I believe, 10 years.
From 2016 on. So 8.
Based upon what your average ranking was, you got classified into different tiers, and based upon your tier, you got a different payout from EA Sports. Never have I ever seen a benefit from being in the West Division of the Big Ten Conference ever until now. Because the only reason...
The fact that Iowa was in so many Big Ten championship games just goes to show the benefit of being in the Big Ten West.
But that didn't... Well, I mean, I guess they probably got a TV rev payout on that, right? But truly,
here they get their $40,000 from EA Sports for being a, quote,
40
tier
extra $1,000
1 school. Yeah. With your Clemsons, with your Alabamas, with your Georgias.
Yeah, tier 1 has 3 Big Ten East schools and Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what? It's fine. I don't care. Iowa doesn't have an NIL game to speak of. They need this more than anyone has ever needed this $40,000.
Yeah.
They still can't afford their point guard with this $40,000, but it is...
This, woe is me, the sky is falling. MSU is tier 2. So is USC. So is Texas. So is Florida.
Washington, most recently in the championship game.
Yeah. Wisconsin, very much a peer institution for MSU.
Greg, you know who else is in tier 2, though? Who also got the Iowa treatment?
You got the U in there. Miami's
Northwestern.
In there.
Northwestern does not deserve to be in tier 2.
In the same way that Iowa's benefiting into tier 1, Northwestern into tier 2.
Because it's like, oh, you play in the Big Ten, you must be good. No, that half of the conference was the MAC.
Speaking of teams in the Big Ten West, did you see who's in tier 4?
Holy shit.
The Nebraska and the Cornhuskers, tier 4 institution. I mean,
so you don't take any beef with Rutger and Maryland being there. You say, yeah, that makes sense. But Nebraska and Iowa.
Nebraska being tier 4. I think when I saw that stood out to me of like, truly, it's so much worse than I understood. Indiana's tier 3.
But you know what's wild about that is that if they had just not fired Bo Pelini, they would be comfortably...
That's what it is. Bo Pelini is on the record talking garbage about everyone with money and power in Nebraska. They're too proud to retain him, and look what happens. You end up tier 4. In the first,
comfortably tier 2. You would have been comfortably tier 2 if you just kept Bo Pelini.
In the 90s, you would have been tier 1. Like, just wild what can happen to a program. And a program that, if you're one of our older listeners, you might recall what Nebraska fans thought was going to happen in the Big Ten when they joined. It was just sort of like, ripe for the pickings. We're going to roll into this joint and mess it up. And here you are, Nebraska fans, Cornhuskers, tier 4. Next to that E for EMU and the D for Duke. Here you are.
Dookie. Who else is that Grambling State in there? Like, there's some logos in here.
Illinois is in
UAB.
there. Central is in there. You'll
The
notice.
Zips are in here. James Madison University. There are multiple Alabama teams in here.
But Indiana is tier 3. Nebraska is tier 4. Wild.
Hawaii. All right. That's enough of that.
That was a graphic that needed to be seen, which we didn't even share on YouTube.
Oh, no. I got it. I can do it. It's fine.
But we didn't. And we're moving on now. So,
okay.
We plugged it before. Do you want to talk about what we're drinking this week?
Yeah, I do. I want to talk about the American Legend Hell House. It's a 90 proof, delicious American whiskey finished with oak staves. It's presented by Leonard Skinnard.
That's right.
It is
Leonard Skinnard, who you agree with politically in everything that they've ever said, correct?
Well, I mean, it's bottled in San Francisco, so I can't disagree, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's what that means. And I've got the old
great whiskeys are bottled in San Francisco, right?
Devil's River out of Texas, I believe. Small batch Texas bourbon whiskey. This is a very solid one. If you see this on the shelf, do pick it up. Or more accurately, if you see it on a shelf across the bar, do order it. All right, Twitter questions. This is the last week of unevaluated Twitter questions, correct? So we'll begin with the one and only Joe Ashworth. Can I get a calendar of everyone's travel plans, wedding schedule, and other potential recording conflicts for the duration of the competition? I need to know who to insult each week to maximize my chances of victory. This is smart. Joe Ashworth, streets ahead of everyone else.
Well, we know Plum doesn't have any weddings because he would only attend them if there was a big game happening that weekend. So, but probably other random travel events for him. Flip a coin on whether Plum's there?
3-sided die. I don't think that such a shape exists, but if it did, that's you get a 33% chance, I think. So plan accordingly.
There's a 3-sided die.
I thought it had to be 4 at the least.
No, you gotta play some D&D, man. It's just a triangle,
but it's got to exist in 3D.
So it's a.
It would. Oh, so it could be like curved, kind of on one side, I guess. Interesting. Okay. Such a thing does exist. It's like 2 flat sides and 1 curved, kind of with a flat side.
Why can't you just do it? No, this is not what I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
well, this doesn't matter.
You're the one that's wrong. I'm not. Do anything fun for Memorial Day? Joe Ashworth asks.
For the day itself, no, I reflected solemnly and watched it rain outside.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I smoked a brisket yesterday, and I feel like I cooked something else interesting today. It doesn't matter. It was fine. I had a nice Memorial Day weekend. How about you,
dude? We had a really solid Memorial Day weekend with some hanging out, some mimosas over F1, just like pretty chill weekend. Saw the Jones family. It was a delight. So we're happy. We're happy with how this Memorial Day weekend went. Next up from Kate Wall, what's your favorite touchdown in MSU history? Can't be a game winner or game sealing touchdown. What? Those are the best ones.
I got one that stands out.
Okay, give me one.
The year is... I've got 2 that stand out. Like, truly, these are actually really memorable touchdowns that don't qualify as either of those things. The year's 2021.
Okay.
The game, Friday night at Northwestern. The play, first one of the game.
First touch.
And Kenneth Walker rips off a 75-yard touchdown, and you're like, ah. The other one was actually a game that we were at together at Rutger with the
this
dap
is the handshake.
Yeah.
Those
are two, like, I know there's some recency bias there, but like, I don't think I'm going to forget either of those touchdowns anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of there have been times where there's been like a turn in the momentum. So if I can't do a game winning or a game tying touchdown, I might go the Rocket play game against Wisconsin. They were up earlier in that game, I think by like 14 or maybe even 17 points. And there was a bit of a momentum swing touchdown that happened late in the second half, right in the end zone that we were seated at, where it was like, okay, this is back on. It's back on the menu. Let's go. And I would, Kate, maybe choose that one of those as my favorite touchdown in MSU history that I've personally seen.
Remember the Drew Stanton comeback game against Northwestern?
Yeah. Yep. Could choose one of those.
Any one of those was great. If we're being real about our true love, that would be.
That was the what's his name? Thomas is he was on special teams because John L. Smith loved to put unique talents on special teams. He forced a fumble. Devin Thomas forced a fumble that caused
Thomas. We were all like
a touchdown.
Remember when he became a wide receiver and we're like, oh, he's very good.
Yep.
Next up, Thomas Zambiasi. Speaking of which, what's more annoying, cut to commercial right after kickoff or neighbors launching fireworks on non-holidays while it's still light out?
Cut to commercial right after kickoff, I think, is more annoying. I can handle fireworks while it's still light out. I actually prefer neighbor fireworks while it's still light out to 3 a.m. or whatever. So,
but, all right,
I'll take that.
So, our neighbor has had fireworks Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Isn't that too much?
Yeah, no, they've got a lot to celebrate and be appreciative for. I think maybe you need to do some consideration about more fireworks that you could be doing for our troops.
They're dead, Kevin. Next up from Thomas Zambiasi, was the football team an offensive powerhouse when the fight song was written? Love the song, but can't say I've seen that many points growing in my time.
I mean, I think we'll say yes, it was. I won't bother looking it up, and we'll just say yes. And Thomas, I can assure you, there have been times where points were growing. Not recently, but there have been times. Next up from the Key Ski, what's your dream vacation in the U.S.?
The Key Ski, I really, more than anything else, want to backpack the John Muir Trail. That is my absolute dream.
John Muir. Okay.
I think we need to accent it.
This is coming from the National Parks documentary series. John Muir. They would do like really sensationalized voiceovers. Yeah, we watched this during the pandemic because
I need to watch this.
That's when you watch those types of programs.
Is it on Netflix? I need to, like, I don't know.
Just go look up. Well, this is all like who John Muir is, how he was formational in the national parks, etc. So
I want to do Whitney while I do it too. In case you were curious, Key. You got one, Greg?
My domestic dream vacation would be, it's an MSU national championship game. There we go.
I would swap my dreams of hiking the John Muir Trail in exchange for a national championship game.
Yeah.
What's your international answer? That's next.
So I don't know. I've got a list that we're going to do at some point. I don't know what the dream is. Do you have one that's like particularly the dream?
Montreal next.
Montreal's the dream. It's a very
Like that's what I'm saying. Like
very attainable dream.
I've been there many times. I don't have a.
Also, is Canada abroad? I would say that it is not abroad.
It's out of the country. Greg, what is your best cheap beer?
I mean, I will always reach for either a Labatt or a Miller High Life. What about yourself? The Miller Lights, right there. For those that aren't on YouTube, can't see it. That was your visual gag, holding up a Miller Lite. Now, next up from Beth Amaro, who's in mourning because her guy's not here. There are thousands of graduating high school seniors getting ready for their first year at MSU. What advice would you give them to prepare over the summer for academic and social success at MSU? Jonesy.
If you, I actually genuinely, like, if I could go back in time a little bit, I would probably do a better job of treating school like a job. And what I mean by that specifically is that there are hours that you work and there are hours that you do not. And because college is not hard.
Correct.
And the harder thing is doing.
It can be at times. It can be challenging.
There are
at times.
Good professors challenge you, but there's a lot of stuff that's not challenging, and it's just doing the work, and not waiting till the last second and maximizing your time. And then, so I would do that. And then, as it relates to social life, I would say first, find your people. You will find them quickly enough. But that beyond that, just be brave and comfortable in that you are not your final product. Like you grow a lot in college. You grow a lot after college. So be comfortable not knowing who you are and that's okay. And so just go out there and do things and find and do them with the people that you know have your back.
I completely agree. I think if you can get into MSU, you'll be successful if you just put the time that you spent in class in high school and dedicated that to college. You'll end up being successful.
Right. Literally, if you could do 8 to 3, you're fine.
You're going to be just fine. Socially, I would ditto everything that you say. I would just add, do put yourself out there a little bit. It can be easy to fall into, this is my floor in the dorms. If you are from Michigan, like, this is my group of high school friends. Force yourself to join a club or something like that. Like something that sounds so dumb, like join a club, or do go on study abroad. Going on study abroad at MSU is an opportunity that will never be available to you again. Relating back to the Keith Skis question, dream vacation abroad might be to have gone on study abroad when I was a student. For most of us, if you graduate from SU, you've got the degree, the money will work itself out eventually. Take a little bit more, loan out, choose a study abroad program, and just go. That's what I would say.
Co-sign on be brave. And I think that's what I meant about, like, find the people that got your back and then be comfortable being uncomfortable. But yes, be brave. Try new things. Go to parties.
Say yes. Say yes.
Yes and everything, except for don't do anything. Like you know when not to.
Yes. Next up from BLO Show, what's your favorite hobby of each of yours?
Does this count?
I was going to say, this takes more time than I think you might understand to listeners. Like, this sort of becomes your hobby. For you, it's that green thumb of yours, though, right? Or
no,
you've got some hobbies. You've got the green thumb. You've got the meats that are smoking. You've got a few.
I like cooking, but I mean, this is probably my bigger, like, truly, like, we, and I mean, I assume you too, but like, there's a fair amount of time that goes into outlining, researching, understanding. Like, we didn't come into the NCAA topic cold. And then,
though it might have sounded like it.
Yeah,
I do apologize.
And then we're now flirting with 2 hours, and then there's going to be editing on this tomorrow, and then there's conversations about titling and audio description, and like this is a full blown dumb hobby that I have, but like it's one that I wouldn't trade for much. So, this would be it. And
next up from Bilo Show,
for his fucking camera.
Yeah.
You need to tell that story next week. No. It's just,
we'll get to that when we're not in hour 2. Next up from Bilo Show, something you wish you were better at.
This.
We're fully formed, perfect beings. So I don't know what you're talking about, Bilo Show. And finally, favorite summer holiday weekend activity.
I don't have. This is gonna be a lame answer, but I don't have one of those. I think for me that I like being outdoors. I like cooking. I like cooking, but all of that stuff is fun because of the people that you get to share it with. So I guess getting ripped with friends is my favorite outdoor summer activity.
And that's what we would tell Beth Amaro to all of the thousands of graduating high school seniors.
Welcome weekend art. 40 in French? I don't.
Yeah. Get ripped with friends. Next up from Pepe Plum, what is most likely this week? Greg's Mike has another seizure. Jones talks grass, not the Jason Nick kind. And Plum goes unhinged and tells us the most graphic story ever. I hope 3. Oh, and my cousin bought a Subaru. She said it's, quote, how I choose to come out. Why is Subaru confirmation of that?
Well, Plum has one, so I think that answers everything you need to know. He turned down the Jeep for it, and there aren't those annoying ducks that symbolize sexual acts either. But
we know that the least likely thing was Plum was going to go unhinged because you'd have to be here for that. So
second least likely was Greg's Mike going seizure, because truly is this 248, Greg? Is this going to be 248?
We're coming in on 250. We're getting dangerously close over here.
And this
number of episodes.
Trust listeners, I know you don't care, but like when that happened, we recounted the number of times that we had true screw ups. And so it was bothersome. So we knew that wasn't going to happen again, I guess is my point.
So there it is. Jones talks about grass and not the Jason Nick kind. So
next up from Pepe Plum, rant of the week, sitting in other people's chairs or at their desk. Just disrespectful. I had a sub horse her pants in my chair last year. I saw her obituary the other day. I feel bad for being happy that she won't be in my chair again. Is Greg's digital Demesk microphone worse than my posts?
I would say that it's horsed than your posts, Pepe Plum. But thoughts and prayers to the horster, the chair horster.
The family of the Horst?
Family of the Horst. Next up from Amopleaf, would this video calm you or distress you as a relaxation tool? What is it? It's a video.
Yep, we're gonna
how does this translate?
There we go.
So what is this, Mike Jones? Describe this
to the we're looking at and listening to the Red Cedar River while the bells of Beaumont Tower are tolling, and we're seeing an old man maybe get up from a lawn chair and struggle with his backpack as he moves back towards the John Hanna administration building.
Okay, stop this. Couple things. Yep. One, I've been to this part of campus about 1,000 times. It is never as loud as that. So I don't know what they're doing with the audio.
They piped that stuff in.
That was not genuine audio. 2, it was a pixelated mess. 3, just go there. just go there. It distresses me that it's so unrepresentative of the actual spot on campus, Mama Belief.
And
So no.
go on the north side of campus of the river as well. You've got some lovely shaded area. It's go over there. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Not a great relaxation tool. And finally, from Mama Belief, would MSU has already named its Final Four! Exclamation point. With your alum status and extensive knowledge of all green and white, all caps, what say you?
This
and then there's a list.
But the form. So list for the winning name of Michigan State University's new autonomous electric bus. First of all, dear listener, and any of you who have children who are going to MSU, don't get on the autonomous bus. Literally drive one with a human being. But the names are Spartan Express with an X, Express, Spartanonymous, Spartabus, and Campus Cruiser. I hate all of these.
Yep. These are not winners. And neither is this question. Next up from Mr. Neurotic Pants. This week, Alan Haller refuses to address rumors that he hired hackers to get access to Central/U of M's communications and claims not to have ever heard of Mount Pleasant. 2, Izzo adds Magic Johnson's 60-year-old brother as a walk-on. Quote, you'd be surprised what he brings on the court. He'll score 2 or 3 times, as much as Stevie. And Pure Options offers continued NIL endorsements to the team, but Smith forbids it. Quote, do you see what it did to Cal Halliday last year?
You brought it home on the last one there, Mr. Like Pants. Well done. Well done. Next up from Mr. Like Pants. I got this. Have you gentlemen ever watched slap fighting contest? Do you think it should be a Big Ten sport? I'd like to watch inebriated Alex Plum slap Jonesy and Grooch at least once. Make a slap sound effect, please.
That's a John L. Smith sound effect for you.
There you go.
I have watched these slap fighting contests, and they are something to behold. I would take them over MMA, that's for sure. If all of a sudden the Big Ten was like, hey, we're going to add kickboxing, I would take slap fighting instead. Jonesy, what do you think about this inebriated Alex Plum slapping the two of us simultaneously? Where are you on this?
Here's the thing. Plum is best with his words. That's not to say that he couldn't do an effective slap, but we have both seen him reduce someone to tears with merely his words. So he doesn't need to partake in any of this nonsense.
Yeah. Next, and finally, from the Upper Deck Jerk Guy, are orchestras just cover bands?
I saw this one, and it really got me scratching my head. Like, really got me scratching the head.
It is really funny because, like, in the pantheon of music, you put orchestras at the top of, like, the hoitiest of the toity, and you put cover bands at the very bottom. But truly, at the end of the day, aren't they really doing the same thing?
Are they a really good cover band? Maybe. There's a this is gonna bug me. I listen to Comedy Bang Bang, and I think there's a cover band that predates us called Dred Zeppelin, which is a reggae Led Zeppelin cover band that has been coming up regularly and in episodes lately. That I'm like,
Dred Zeppelin. Okay,
it made quite an impression on people. All right. Next up from Upper Deck Jerk Guy are Alex Plum, Mike Jones, and Bob Grooch just stage names. Sadly, that is my real name.
Yeah, I take offense to this. You know, the Grooch family goes back generations and is proud, and to suggest that that I would, not be a pure proud Grooch. I mean, offensive. Upper Deck Jerk Guy. Truly offensive. And finally, from he, the Upper Deck Jerk Guy, what would your walk-up song be, and why would each of you use, quote, American Idiot?
Well, I would
on this Memorial Day.
Leonard Skinnerd Hell House whiskey. So obviously, Sweet Home Alabama is what I'm walking up to.
The anti-war anthem of our generation, American Idiot.
Anyway, Greg, it's been a fun one. I anticipate that we will not cover all the things that we said we would cover on the next episode, but here's to trying. In the meantime, gentlemen, just you, not gentlemen, gentle sir, go green.
And to you, go away, gentlemen.